Today on Pots and Trowels we're checking on the plants that are being overwintered in the greenhouse, and that's brought to you with the support of Allett and Cobra Garden. Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels. Well, you found me in the greenhouse today where it's a bit warmer. I can get out the breeze. It's quite a blustery day here in North Yorkshire, so if you hear any rattles and creaks, then don't worry, it's just the greenhouse in the wind. Now, we've had some pretty cold weather over the last week. We had quite a mild autumn, and then we were hit by the storm at the weekend, and although we've not had the snow where we are, we've certainly had some low temperatures down to about -5 centigrade. So any plants that were tender would have been killed outside or certainly damaged by that frost, but fortunately I'd brought the ones that need that little bit of protection just into this greenhouse. Now, this little greenhouse here, it's nothing fancy, it's just a small aluminium lean-to greenhouse, but this is ideal if you want to overwinter things that need that little bit of protection. It's not heated, so I'm not putting any plants in here that, you know, are exotic, that need high temperatures. They would need a heater. This has got no permanent heat at all, but you can still overwinter quite a lot just by getting them out of the wind and the rain and that frost. So here we've got a selection of plants that have been brought in. We've got the pelargoniums, we've got the aeoniums, the clivias, and all different bits and bobs that were outside in containers. Now, the first thing to do if you're trying to protect plants is to probably insulate the greenhouse or the cold frame that you've got with bubble polythene. This is great. This is going to trap the warm air in here, and on a warm day when the sun's shining, it's surprising how warm it gets in here, and this will trap the heat and then it releases it at night, so it just evens out the temperature that little bit. So a great way of insulating and stopping the drafts in here. The other thing that I have got in here, my one concession to a little bit of heat, and it is only a tiny little bit, just over here behind me I've got my little propagator. It's just a sand bed. You can probably see it's just a wooden frame with sand in there, and it's got, if I can dig down and find one, and when you want one you can't find one, can you? There are cables in there. There we go, there's one of the soil warming cables there, these cables, and they're only just warm. They only use about as much power as a light bulb, but what that does is just takes the chill off. So I've got a selection of cuttings on there that have been rooting, and then in this little covered perspex lid I've got some evergreen cuttings that I'm rooting in there, and it's not hot, but it just takes the chill off, and that overall just gives that extra little bit of warmth into the greenhouse, and it certainly helps with cuttings like this. These are all pelargonium cuttings that I took back in September time, just 3 or 4 in a small pot. It's worth just checking them over. Any leaves that have gone yellow, take them off, and we can see, if I just carefully knock that one out, it has made a really good root system there since these were taken in September. Now, I will leave these on the bench. I'm not going to disturb them at this time of the year. They will just sit quite happily on there, keeping them only just moist. Certainly don't water them. And then around about late February, early March, what I'll do is pot those up into bigger pots. They'll grow on because then the days are getting longer and the temperatures are getting that little bit warmer. So what we've got on here is a selection of plants. One thing you need to do is just pick them over. Any dead leaves like this we need to take off. This is a scented pelargonium called Mrs. Plymouth. It's got a wonderful variegated leaf and quite a fragrant foliage, so we don't want any dead leaves on. So it's worth just checking your plants, not weekly but every now and again, to make sure that any leaves like this are picked off, because if we leave them and they get wet, then they can rot and it's a source of fungal infection, and it makes them look better as well. And any little dead bits we can trim off and just tidy around the pots. Likewise, I've got, put that in the bin, one here that's been cut down. This pelargonium, it's been cut down, had some cuttings taken off it, but then I've trimmed it down, but we've got some dead bits on it, and again, we don't want dead bits on plants, so I'm just going to trim back any dead bits to a growing shoot. In fact, that is still dead in there. I can see that that's squodgy, so that will die more, so I'm going to cut it a little bit further so that it's nice and healthy. And we've got this tall stem here that looks ugly on this. I'm going to cut that one back to there, so that when this does grow in the spring, it's all going to bush out from here, and that will make a really lovely plant. So it is really worth just checking the plants over to make sure you've got rid of all the leaves like that. Now when it comes to watering, it's really important that we don't overwater through the winter. So when we do water, we only water sparingly. The idea is to keep the compost just moist and not wet. So what I'm going to do is just to give this a drink over there like that, just give it enough, and then that will soak down just to give it enough to keep that plant ticking over. And then I won't give that any more water until that starts to dry out, and you get to know your plants. You know, I can feel that now I've given that a drink, there's a little bit more weight to it, whereas this one is very light and needs a drink. So if in doubt, underwater than overwater. And the other thing that you can do if we've got some frosty weather forecast, certainly if the temperatures are only getting down to 2s or 3s at night, I won't do anything. But if we're going to get -2 degrees, then what I do is to bring out the fleece, and this is a wonderful invention, great for all different things in the garden, inside and out. And what I will do, if there is a frost forecast and I'm worried it's going to get through the bubble polythene, I will come out of an afternoon and I will drape 2 or 3 layers of this fleece over the plants, and again that traps a little bit of heat in there, and it will give a couple of degrees of extra frost protection. So with the combination of keeping a dry atmosphere, the bubble polythene, the fleece, you should be able to keep the frost out of it. But if you really did need to give a little bit of heat, then what you could do is you could get yourself a little heater like this. This is just a small fan heater. It can be 1 or 2 kilowatts. It's got a thermostat on it, and you can set it to the frost setting. So this won't actually switch on with any heat until the temperature probably gets down to just a couple of degrees above freezing. It will raise the temperature, then switch off. I don't like to use this in here. I don't need to really. I can keep the frost out. But if you've got a greenhouse where you need that little bit more heat, that is absolutely ideal for it. And finally, this is a good present, Christmas present for somebody. Keep one of these in the greenhouse. This is a maximum minimum thermometer, and it tells you what the temperature is at the moment. I pushed the clear, so I've zeroed it. Tells me the temperature at the moment, the maximum that it's been, and the minimum that it's been overnight. And this is a great aid for the greenhouse. Absolutely wonderful, so you know what the temperature's been at night while you're tucked up in bed. You know how cold it's been in the greenhouse. So enjoy it. I love to come in here when it's a day and I can't do anything in the garden. I can always find something, a bit of deadheading, taking a few old leaves off, just having a general tidy up and checking the plants to keep them nice and healthy, so that then next year we can enjoy them back out in the garden. Well, thank you for watching, and thank you for all the likes and shares. Next week I'm going to be harvesting some of the root vegetables from the garden, and then I'm going to be joining Jill in the kitchen, and she's going to transform them into a wonderful Christmas dish that you can make in advance and put in the freezer. So join us then. Bye.